Starship takes off today. Maybe. Or does it blow up? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. And this is a little earlier than usual, as you know. In fact, it's an hour earlier because I want you to have plenty of time to watch what could be a very exciting program. Today, Starship. Not an actual interstellar vessel, but the most powerful rocket ship ever built, has an integrated test flight. The Federal Aviation Administration granted launch licensure, and the Space Exploration Company, or SpaceX, announced a definite launch attempt. This will result either in the greatest catastrophe in the history of spaceflight or a permanent change in the space launch game. SpaceX, the builder of Starship, has its reputation on the line as never before, considering a nearly unblemished record of success stretching for several years in putting payloads, real payloads, into orbit. Now, only a very stubborn and very visionary man would take the risk that Elon Musk, the owner of SpaceX, is now taking. I'm going to review the history both of actual space programs and the flights of fancy in fiction and drama, so you will understand why I say that. But first, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Links in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which depicts a symbol of our country, the bald eagle, and this legend: eagles fly alone, pigeons need a flock. I do not exaggerate when I say that Elon Musk flies with the eagles. He is a modern Howard Hughes, hopefully without the appalling baggage that Howard Hughes carried. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come up with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. And, one last thing. I do not, repeat, not have any sponsorship agreement with SpaceX or any other company that Elon Musk owns. And if I ever sign one, it will be with the clear understanding that I reserve the right to speak about him and his company's well or ill at my sole discretion. With that out of the way, let's start with the obvious fictional vessels that some call starships in the generic sense. They are Space Cruiser Charlie 57 Delta from Forbidden Planet, directed by F.M. Wilcox with Leslie Nielsen, Anne Francis, and Walter Pidgeon, MGM 1956, and a plethora of ships, all named USS Enterprise, in a television and motion picture franchise called Star Trek. The politics of the latter franchise, including a real-life political candidate making a more than cameo appearance on it, need not concern us here, except that the most famous actress from the original series clearly broke new ground that needed breaking. How Star Trek, like Forbidden Planet before it, played fast and loose with basic physics concerns me more. Both franchises assume faster-than-light travel and total gravity manipulation, enabling a crew to walk on a flat deck. What carried both franchises were the believability of the shareholders, of the characters rather. Though in this regard, Forbidden Planet, which assumed that a ship of a spaceborne navy would have enlisted ratings, was more realistic. Star Trek assumes that everyone aboard a starship is the equivalent of a qualified astronaut, therefore an officer. Real officers and enlisted in real navies understand intuitively that this cannot hold. Then came 2001, A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick, with Keir Dullea, Gary Lockwood, Douglas Ray, that's the voice of Hal, and William Sylvester, MGM 1968. Kubrick broke the mold with the first realistic portrait of space travel, respecting the limitations of physics. Weightlessness is a thing. Flight attendants wear full hair encasing bonnets and grip shoes to walk the decks. Space is silent unless you're inside the ship or you're wearing an EVA suit. To achieve the equivalent of gravity, you have to be within a centrifuge. Now this can be either the entire structure, like Space Station 5, shown with one section under construction, or a structure within the structure, like the working, eating, and sleeping deck aboard USS Discovery X-Ray Delta 1. And the up and down orientation, purely arbitrary. To be sure, Kubrick did goof. Now some of his goofs I can forgive. I mean, after all, neither he nor the owners of certain brands that he placed in his movie, Pan Am, Howard Johnson's, Ma Bell, Hilton, and nobody could have predicted that most of these brands wouldn't be there anymore. I mean, it was worse than them than look to your left and look to your right. But Kubrick did make two major technical goofs. The Pan Am airliner that docks with Space Station 5 looked like a single-stage to orbit craft. Sorry, that violates the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation. Furthermore, Heywood Floyd and his stewardess ride in comfort from hub to wheel, in total disregard of the Coriolis forces that would fling them both to one end of the wraparound couch on which they sat without safety belts. Less importantly, the landing cockpit of the Translunar Shuttle does not appear on the model, which makes it more than a trifle difficult to envision where those pilots are sitting when they are looking down at the surface of the moon for their target. I think they just use the same set as for the shuttle that takes Dr. Floyd and his team out to see the great black stone on the moon, but I digress. For all that, I give Stanley Kubrick a lot of credit for a realism no one has yet equaled. That aside, at least two space scientists, Robert Duncan Ensman and Harry Stein, envisioned ship designs and even a complete program for interstellar exploration and colonization. I've talked about that before, if you recall. Now, Elon Musk might or might not be thinking that far ahead. Right now, he is trying to get his actual Starship off the ground. Starship consists of two parts, both of which will be reusable. Booster and the ship on top. Each has had at least some independent tests. The booster recently passed the greatest static fire test in history. Several versions of the ship have taken off and all but one have blown up, either in flight or after landing. But one of them didn't blow up, and that was enough for Musk to proceed to today's test. Elon Musk needs this vessel to support his real ambition, to plant a self-supporting city on Mars. Of course, he also plans for this vessel to support itself economically. I'm going to get into how it can support itself economically, including how much it can carry in comparison to the granddaddy of all successful rockets, the Saturn V. But first, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com. Learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, just how much can Starship carry? Starship will be able to carry at least 100 or maybe even 150 metric tons into low Earth orbit. Now, the old Saturn V managed 140 metric tons. But Musk wants to refuel it in flight so that it could move those 150 metric tons to geostationary Earth orbit or to translunar or transmartian injection. Now, the most the Saturn V could manage was 43 metric tons to TLI. That was enough to send a 3-man crew to the moon and back and gather and return samples. But it would not, contrary to the Peter Hyams film Capricorn 1, support moving such a payload to TMI. Starship, with the proposed in-flight refueling, could accomplish feats of which the builders of Saturn V scarcely dreamed. I must apologize to H.G. Wells and to George Powell, producer of the best War of the Worlds adaptation that I have ever seen in the movies. SpaceX already intends using Starship to lift the next generation of Starlink satellites into orbit. These are simply too heavy for its current workhorse, Falcon 9. And Falcon Heavy, since it must expend one of its 3 tandem boosters, would cost too much. No one yet has a payload that large, as large as 100 metric tons. But as soon as one creates a new tool, someone else invents a use even the original inventor never imagined. Given the successes SpaceX now enjoys with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, many might anticipate today's launch with complete confidence. Well, even Elon Musk would not go that far. I have a link in the description to his pithy tweet. Success, maybe. Excitement, guaranteed. Well, might he advise caution. Before SpaceX, no one even imagined reusing any part of a rocket ship, even the booster. But boosters are expensive. Apparently, Elon tried to buy rockets from RKK Energia, the Russian rocket builder. They basically told him he was out of his league. No way could he afford this. So he made a decision that Charles A. Lindbergh no doubt would recognize. If you can't buy one, build one. And the first thing Elon Musk recognized was how incredibly wasteful rocket building is. One does not, as he pointed out, use a commercial airliner or air freighter once and then throw it away. But in space exploitation, one does it all the time. Musk would change that. As of today, he hasn't lost a Falcon 9 booster in too many years for me to count. But once, he lost them all the time. And then 1 in 3, then 1 in 10, and finally, no more. The problem for him is that people forget about all the boosters he lost before he could make Falcon 9 reliable enough to use it to send astronauts to the International Space Station or the new Axiom station, now under construction. Still fewer people alive today recall the failures of Project Vanguard, which had 2 successes, and Projects Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. Tom Wolfe, in The Right Stuff, recalled Mercury's failures, like the rocket that blew up directly overhead, and the Redstone rocket that literally popped the cork. Boop! In fact, that was the Mercury capsule's launch escape system. Now that at least functioned as designed, if the rocket itself did not. Nor do they want to remember the horrific fire that killed 3 astronauts, 2 of them veterans, in a rehearsal. Now that might be one reason why Elon Musk does not use test pilots in his Starship development program. And not to mention the one failure that almost cost the lives of 3 astronauts but didn't. Apollo 13. People prefer instead to remember the successes of these programs and the astronauts who went up and came back. But perhaps they should remember a rocket named N1, a project of the old Soviet Union. Had it succeeded, it might have sent even heavier payloads than Saturn V managed to the moon and brought them back. But it failed. In the most spectacular and deadly fashion, it failed. On July 3rd, 1969, an N1 took off, cleared the launch tower, barely, and then blew up. It was the worst explosion in the history of rocket development. It destroyed the launch complex, and only by a miracle did the Soviets not lose any lives that day. The Soviets would try twice more and then cancel the program. And 13 days after that spectacular second launch failure, Apollo 11 would launch, and we know how that turned out. SpaceX absolutely cannot afford a failure as catastrophic as N1's second flight. Now that's even allowing that the failure of N1's second flight could have been worse. More of the fuel could have detonated, or it could have mixed with the air to form an explosive gel. That is not likely to happen with engines that burn methane, but an explosion of the booster alone could destroy the entire proving ground and kill people. To say nothing of the animal habitats that prompted the Sierra Club to beg the FAA to disallow the program. Don't just take my word for that. I've left a link in the description of their statement demanding another full environmental review of the Boca Chica proving ground. Now, I do not have any links to any statement of theirs following the grant of the launch license for the simple reason they haven't made one. Are they sulking? Or are they holding their breath? We'll find out soon enough today. They'll likely either breathe a sigh of relief or scream bloody murder. The most Starship will accomplish today is to first, lift off without blowing up. Second, clear the tower. Third, reach and pass the maximum aerodynamic pressure or max Q point. Then fourth, separate the booster from the ship. The booster must then flip around, light at least some of its engines, stop, reverse trajectory, fall back into the Gulf of Mexico. If the ship survives to separation, it should have no hazard for the next hour or so. The most hazardous parts of any rocket mission are liftoff and landing, same as for an airplane. So the ship will coast to re-entry and splash down off Hawaii. So we wait for either the worst disaster since the loss of the airship Hindenburg in 1937, or the first step toward changing the rocket launch game forever. And to make sure you get a good view, I've left a link in the description to each of two scheduled live streams. One from SpaceX themselves, the other from Jordan Wright, otherwise known as the Angry Astronaut. One might expect success to overshadow even America's contentious politics. After all, Apollo 8 did that in December of 1968. That one event overshadowed everything else that year, including two political assassinations, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York, riots in inner cities and college campuses, the death of one of the last presidents to have universal love, Dwight D. Eisenhower, known as Ike, to his friends, relatives, and associates, a political convention that saw riots and skull-cracking police response, and we all remember Walter Cronkite practically snarling, "I'd say we got a bunch of thugs down there, Dan!" And a long and bitter presidential election that could have ended in another throw to the House of Representatives, which did not happen. Apollo 8 caused all that to pale into insignificance. For SpaceX Starship to do the same will take more time, if it can happen at all. Before I list all the links in the description, I want to shout out to Mr. Bill Davis, who created the collage that I'm using for a thumbnail. Lunar Options, he calls it. Bless his heart, he put it out into the public domain. So let's hear it for Bill Davis. Hip, hip, hooray! For all the hard work he did. Links in the description of the article, to Elon's success and excitement tweet, to the Sierra Club statement, to two live streams by the Angry Astronaut and SpaceX, in that order, to my Declarations of Some Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to OurSilverLines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my Face playlist and the 2 live streams. This is Terry A. Horba delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.